Everybody for attending today's webinar. Today's session is all about Autodesk Fusion Lifecycle and specifically about the items, bill of materials, and change management environment within Fusion Lifecycle. A couple weeks ago or so, we actually did a introduction to Fusion Lifecycle, and that has been recorded. If you happen to have the registration link for that previous meeting, you can go and watch that recording. If anybody on the line here would like to see that and didn't get the notification for that, go ahead and email us or send us a question here, and we can get that information to you. We'll be providing our email or my email address a little bit later as well, so you can email me directly rather than just using the GoToWebinar interface. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, today is all about Autodesk Fusion Lifecycle, but that is really part of Autodesk's product innovation platform. So Fusion, which is kind of the center of that platform, it's the PLM component, or the PLM, excuse me, Fusion Lifecycle is the PLM component of Autodesk's Fusion platform. So Fusion is really uniting all the various design disciplines, the design part of the management, being able to make things with some of the CAM capabilities and so on today, and then to be able to use things more effectively. Now these kind of break out into a complete solution that really includes things like generative design technologies, then also additive manufacturing and 3D printing, and also more Internet of Things type capability that incorporate technology from things like Fusion Connect. So Fusion Lifecycle is kind of at the center of all this to manage the data, not only on Autodesk's Fusion platform, but from any other product lifecycle management perspective as well. So what is Fusion Lifecycle? It's Autodesk product innovation management platform, and it includes a broad set of processes that we would use to create and maintain and communicate product information. And that's all the way from ideation of concepts all the way to the end of a product life. A little bit broader context, it includes design, engineering, CAD data management, and maybe even Internet of Things type technology. So PLM software in general connects and organizes the people in an organization and information involved there with their processes so it can improve the effectiveness and value of those processes. So just a quick slide here on industry challenges in general. One of the reasons PLM is becoming more and more a core of many successful companies today is because they have understood that being able to make better decisions earlier is allowing them to be a lot more effective and to really define their product better up front and reduce the amount of costs due to changes later on. So there's really two things that are going on here. First, every product development decision and part selection and so on, how it'll be sourced and manufactured, all that is really starting to be defined more upfront or earlier in the design process. Once something's ready for prototyping, the kind of architectural or strategic decisions about that design are pretty set in stone. They're really hard to change significantly. The second thing is that as your product progresses through its life cycle, it becomes more and more complex and expensive to make changes. So once a product's actually manufactured and shipped in the field, the cost of a change just increases exponentially compared to an initial design change. So why business process improvement, or why PLM, product lifecycle management, to manage that business process? Well, if you're like a lot of companies I've seen that don't have an electronic system or don't have a very rigid defined manual process, it's pretty common that companies operate in a lot of functional silos, and the department heads and so on, they set up their own processes using whatever tools they might have available. A lot of times it's just Excel and email and yell at the guy over the cube wall and that type of stuff. But little attention's normally paid to how the information is flowing through the company or between different departments or different disciplines. So while individuals might be individually organized, the whole process as a whole involves people, across all these different disciplines and different departments in the company, and that usually becomes pretty chaotic and inconsistent. The product information, the lifeblood of most manufacturers, it's hard to find, it's inconsistent, it's outdated potentially, might be hard to interpret. That leads to errors, delays, inefficiencies, and maybe more importantly, low morale and difficulty in hiring talented people that are want to stay with your company. So most companies aren't even aware of the some of these layers of redundancy and slack they've built into their business's usual processes. So Fusion Lifecycle, it's a unique cloud-based solution that's really effectively connecting and organizing those people and processes and the product information all in one central location. It provides a single source of truth for the items and their suppliers, the bill of materials, the documents, and any changes involved. It also helps to facilitate contextual role-based collaboration, maybe both internally within the company and throughout your extended enterprise, potentially including suppliers or partners and so on. So hundreds of companies, all sizes, all over the place and across multiple industries are starting to profit from Fusion Lifecycle. They've discovered that it's an unmatched performance, ease of use, and the rich capabilities involved are helping them dramatically improve how they create, build, and support and evolve their products and services. So a little bit about why you might want to consider Fusion Lifecycle. So going back to just business reasons, while PLM in general is important for the most part, and these are also benefits for Fusion Lifecycle, time to market, being able to have a process that flows through your organization well, that doesn't have a lot of slack and downtime in it. The time paper sits in somebody's inbox is reduced, for example. So getting to market faster, being able to accelerate that product revenue, and reducing that cycle time. And that's just because of the workflows, the process streamlining that Fusion Lifecycle can provide. Now, from a productivity standpoint, there's a lot of processes that individuals can have more streamlined, and it's just going to make the individuals more productive as well. Finally, cost and risk, reducing scrap and things like that, rework, warranty expenses. These are all things that PLM in general can help to reduce. And all those together should improve your cash flow within your company as well. So Fusion Lifecycle, in a nutshell, is helping you save time and money. It provides value for a lot of the things people are doing today that maybe don't actually provide value or performance in your product line. Things like searching for information, reworking because you've got a duplicate part that you didn't realize that you already had something similar to. Being able to do a lot of work without having as many meetings, having information at your fingertips to understand where things are at, between the reporting that's involved and the information available that's readily accessible but through simple searches, and maybe project information that's right on a dashboard, for example. Then a lot of the clerical work, just the simple taking of information maybe from engineering and having somebody type it into other business systems and try to manage 2 or 3 silos of the same relevant information throughout a company. That data entry and that clerical work can be drastically reduced and tied together through Fusion Lifecycle. So you start thinking about these things, most companies spend a significant amount of time on what it really amounts to non-value added work. It's somewhat wasteful. So you might ask yourself, well, I wonder how much waste we have at our company. I don't know what the answer to that would be, but in general, the average knowledge type worker, professionals in an engineering or design type environment, for example, or a company that's in that business, spends about half their time performing product related processes, And they're saying that 70% of that is non-value added. So it's the searching, the meetings, the rework, the clerical, reporting, the data entry, and all that. And this is based on a survey from Autodesk to its customers prior to implementing Fusion Lifecycle. So today, the technical part of our presentation is going to cover a couple of main categories. So the first session we talked kind of broadly about the things Fusion Lifecycle can do, and we introduced a couple of the things in a demo. Today we're going to talk and demo a little bit more specifically about items and BOMs and the relationship between those, and also the change management environment. So items and BOMs, if you're not familiar with items themselves, items are really a container. They're the items and BOMs in general. They're like the central lifeblood of most organizations. It's like that central source of truth for everybody in an organization to be able to refer to. Most of the time, companies that have an ERP, MRP systems, it's items and BOM information there that is kind of the core of all that. And a lot of other topics or areas of management within a company's PLM processes are tied to and linked with and dependent on items and bill of materials type information. So if you're doing a change process, for example, you're probably performing changes on items and bill of materials data. Your manufacturing, of course, is referencing items and BOM. Purchasing people are looking through the item master, looking at the bill of materials for a project or a product and having to refer to that in their purchasing decisions. Quality management is always referring to the quality of those items. Then project and program management, the overall management of a project or a program typically needs to be tied to the delivery and development of the items, the bill of materials for that project or process. Some companies even go so far as to manage requirements of the product they're delivering, especially if they've got a very stringent OEM that has very specific criteria for a supplier. And finally, something like sales quotes even. It can be much easier to estimate and quote a product if you have a history of a bill of materials and the relative pricing structure of past projects or programs you've worked on. So that's just a little bit of an overview of items and BOMs in general. Let's just take a little bit quicker or deeper dive into items. So, what are they? Why are they used? So most people, I think, understand the concept of a bill of materials to an extent. What items are is a container to store information or objects. And these could include information about those objects. So generally those objects are parts and assemblies, let's think about it that way. And the container, the item, is what defines a part or an assembly. So items can have categories. They can define whether something's purchased, fabricated, assembled. Maybe it's a electronic assembly. Maybe it's a particular category of manufacturing. Maybe you've got certain things that are fabricated, assembled components. You might have other things that are a machined component, so you can categorize, maybe even break it down into the type of products or parts you're creating to keep things more organized. Items also typically are where you're managing a revision on something. So you have an item revision, and a revision of that item contains all the relevant documentation, such as the latest up-to-date drawing, the latest up-to-date sourcing locations if you're getting this from a supplier. It also is keeping track of the release status of something. So whether it is currently something that's a new work in process or R&D type component, or whether it has been released or approved for production. So the items themselves are linked to all kinds of other stuff in a PLM system. First of all, items are what make up parts and assemblies in the structure of a BOM, which we're talking about in just a moment. But they're also linked to change orders, linked to the supplier for purchased items, and any other supporting documentation that might be involved, such as the drawings or the models or design specifications, or maybe even computer-aided engineering test data, and those type of things. So items are like the individual elements that make up a bill of materials. So in a bill of materials, it is that collection of items and other relevant information associated with those. So you might have a structure of different items, and then determine what their quantities would be, determine if there's going to be, for example, a quantity that's different than what was in a CAD model, as an example. So kind of put it into perspective, people might have a CAD bill of materials that might not include everything that you need for the manufacturer or even just the engineering organization of that bill of material. So non-CAD items are commonly in an engineering BOM, but they wouldn't be in a CAD BOM. That could be like a packaging item, for example, or it could be something like a lubricant that isn't going to be modeled. So anything that maybe you do need to procure, you do need to consider for the development or the production of something would typically be in that bill of material, but it might not necessarily be in CAD. So that's kind of the concept of an engineering BOM or an E-BOM right there. That you might not have everything you want in a CAD system, but the E-BOM or the bill of materials in your PLM system or business system contains pretty much everything you need to put something into production. Okay, and finally, just a bit about change management. So change management, this could be just really a more in-depth or a more focused workflow is what we could consider this. It's a set of focused processes to manage engineering change requests, engineering change orders, and so on. And it's an electronic method to do that. And it's kind of like a container as well, so you can link relevant items that are going to be impacted by a change, put notes and information in. You could potentially even have an attachment showing what needs to happen with changes. So all the relevant information about a change can be associated with a change order, as an example. Then it's linked to other relevant information, so all the items that didn't need to be impacted. And maybe most importantly with change management is that there's a formal workflow, process flow involved that is tracked. So somebody can go ahead and make a change request, then it goes through maybe a review process where they determine if the change is going to happen, then it gets assigned to somebody. Finally, when they get done with their work, it goes for a review and it gets approved and then finally released back into a production item, potentially with a new revision. So that's the general concept behind change management. So at this point, I think we are ready to jump into a live review of the product. And for that, I've got Rodney Coffey from Razorleaf on the line. And he's going to be taking us through a bit of a demonstration on items, bill of materials, and the change management environment. So I'll switch you, Rodney, over to the presenter, if you're all ready to go.
Yeah, should be all set. It's a great job, Ben, setting us up. So good afternoon, everyone. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the actual product. We're going to build on what we did in the last demonstration, so I won't cover too much overview here. But what we're going to do is we're going to specifically look at what a items and BOMs environment and a change management environment look like inside a Fusion Lifecycle. So to sort of set the stage today, what we're going to be seeing is what you actually get out of the cloud when you purchase a Fusion Lifecycle license. So everything you'll see today is pretty standard and set up, like I said, out of the cloud. So first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at an item and a bill of material. So if I go to the main menu, this is managed in the product development application. You'll see here we have an items and BOMs, what we call a workspace in Fusion Lifecycle. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that menu. When we come to the items and BOMs workspace, we have a view of all the items that exist in this space. Now I have this filtered using the views as we described last time. So you can see if I go and I do my default view, we'll see we have a rather long list of items that exist. Every item record or every container has been put in this workspace represents an individual material or BOM. So we're going to look at the 900 1 LG3100 assembly here. You can see here I can expand and contract the list of items. So we're looking at the information that's just relevant to this assembly. So across the top we'll see the current life cycle for this assembly, the current revision, or if this had a previous revision, which I'll be showing today, you'll be able to see from the pull down all the released revisions of that bill of material. So I could see A, B, C, and D if those existed. Also, another important thing is we release things to manufacturing. We either need to conserve based on the available inventory, or perhaps we don't want to release our supply chain until a certain date, so the effectivity date is important. So the effectivity date can be set the day we release a change order, or it can be set to some period in the future which we decide to release this bill of material. So those are 3 important things that we're going to see impacted by the change order. Now if we just take a look at this assembly, you'll see we have what we call the item detail screen, and this tells us a little bit about that material. So I'll just hit edit here. You'll see it gets auto-assigned a number. We have a description field, of course a unit of measure. You can see there's a number of different types that come with the system that we can use. We're just going to leave that set to each. And then we have a classification structure. So there's certain information that we want relevant to what type of material it is. So for example, let's say you were creating a bolt in the system, you would want to know the thread, the length, the type of bolt. Maybe it's a hex head bolt or a different type of bolt, right? So these fields are customizable, and this classification can be set up dependent on material type. You'll also see here we have a section where we can contain different manufacturer numbers and whether that manufacturer is approved, conditionally approved. Maybe there's a manufacturer we had tied to this component that we no longer want to use. So this actually starts to tie into a little bit of the supplier management capability that we have in Fusion Lifecycle also. And we can talk about that in a future session. So we're going to go ahead and leave that section blank for today. You'll also see in this particular setup for items and BOMs, we have some environmental information. So we can see we have the RELS compliant, whether it's REACH compliant or not, or whether it's conflict materials. Again, none of these apply for what we're going to do today, so we're going to leave those blank. Right. And the next tab we have, so this does happen to be an assembly. So if we look at our bill of material view, here we can see the actual component and structure of the components related to this assembly. So for this guy, you can see each column in here is expandable or contractible. You can see we have the top level, which is shown as 0, 0, and then each child component of that assembly is represented here in the sub-hierarchy. Now we don't have a sub-assembly here, but if we did, you would simply click another expansion and then it'll show that total hierarchy. So here we're seeing all the parent and child relationships of the bill of material. We can see this particular assembly has been released, so we're currently at revision A. Right. You can see here we have, if you have like an electrical BOM, right? So let's say we were doing a circuit board, you could also go through and you could assign reference designators or a wire harness, for example, to the bill of material. The stamp here I'm going to show a little bit later also, but this tells us if any component in our bill of material is currently assigned to a change order. So in our system, a single component can exist on one change order. Right? So here we would be able to see whether any component existed on that. The next column here we see is whether any of these components have an attachment. So you can see here that these two components, the 2 and the 3, both have an attachment. So let's just open one of these up on a new tab and take a peek. So just by right-clicking open a new tab, just regular browser functionality, we open up the part component, so the material, on a different tab, and if we were to look at its attachment tab, you'll see that it has a specification tied to it. Right? So again, just going back to the other tab here and looking at the BOM, just from the BOM view, I'm able to see which documents or which materials have attachments related to them, whether they're on a change order or not, and what revision they're currently at. And then of course we have some standard BOM information like quantity and the units. A couple other things on this screen I want to point out. You can customize this view, and you can have custom BOM fields applied to this view. So I have a couple of these set up. This is the default view that comes with the product. I might have maybe an environmental compliance view. So I have fields that are tracking environmental compliance things, and I want those to be shown up on a different BOM. Or perhaps I have a certain BOM that I like to export for a certain vendor. So I could also have an export BOM view, which displays the grid for the BOM in a different configuration, right? So I can move the columns around into a different configuration. I can choose different fields that I want to display, things like effectivity date, release date. So all of this is customizable. So we're just going to kick back to our default view. A few other things to note before we leave this. We also have a flat view of the BOM. So you can see that takes all of our components and rolls them up to a flat view. So if I had subassemblies or subassemblies of subassemblies, this takes all the components and flattens out that BOM for structure. And then a few other things we can do here. We can easily export the BOM to Excel. So if we did need to take this, export it, and pull it into, say, an ERP system or send it out to someone who doesn't have access to the system, all we have to do is click the Excel button here, the Export to Excel, and you can see that exports that BOM. Go ahead and open that guy up so we can take a peek at it. Taking my Excel a minute, and that's popping it up on another screen. There we go. So you can see we get a good Excel view of the bill of material. And the other thing we can do is all of these attachments. So you might have a really large BOM and a ton of attachments or specifications tied to each material. And I want to bundle all of that information up, and I want to archive it, or I want to send it to a vendor or send it to someone else who needs that in a package. We can use this option, the Zip and Download Attachments option, and that will go through this entire BOM hierarchy and give us a zip file of all the attachments. So you can see here we have specification 2 and the specification 3, these two attachments, and it exported those into a zip file for me. Now, a couple other tabs here. We have the Where Used tab. Now remember, I'm at the highest level, I'm at the assembly level. Let's take a look at the component again. Right? So here we have this component. I want to see everywhere in Fusion Lifecycle that I use this component. Right? So on the Where Used tab, that will display that information for me. So here I can see which assembly and the revision of that assembly that this component is then used in. I also want to see every change, every engineering change that was ever related to this component. So if I slide over here and I look at the Related Changes tab, here I can see any change order that was ever written against this material. I can also see where it's at, the current state of that change order, who performed the approval, creation, and last action on that change order. All right. So let's take a look at what it takes to modify this bill of materials. Right? So we're going to actually add a new component to our assembly. So we're going to go back here. We're going to look, currently this assembly is at revision A, right? And it has these three components. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to create a new material. We're going to add that material to a BOM, and then we're going to use the change process, an engineering change request and change order, to release that new bill of material. All right. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to create a brand new component. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click the plus sign here. We're going to generate that new component, and we are going to call it the LG 3100 Part 5. And we're going to give it a classification of, we're going to use BOM for now, and we're going to give it a class number of 900. You can see it fills out some other information for me. Let's say that this component is ROS compliant, and we're going to go ahead and save this guy. Now this material, this part that I've just created, isn't attached to a BOM just yet. Right? So you can see it has no bill of material. It's not used anywhere. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to filter this view down to just my components, and we're going to go back and we're going to take a look at that assembly. Now every component, every BOM or material in Fusion Lifecycle has what we call a working version. So the working version is the copy that I'm working on, right? So we have a released version. This is what production's building. This is what we've released to our suppliers, our vendors. People can use that. The working version is actually what we're working on, right? So this is the next release or the next version of this bill of material. No one can see this except for the people who have been given permission in the system to see this. So a lot of times this is your engineers, this is the operations folks, the folks actually generating the BOM. So we're going to go add this component to the working version of our assembly. So I'm going to go over to the BOM tab, and I'm going to pick Add, and we're going to get a big list of all the bill of materials in this space. What I'm going to do is I'm going to search based on 900, because I know that's part of my part number, and you can see down here we have number 5. So we're going to go ahead and add the unreleased number 5, the new material, to this BOM. And we're going to enter in the quantity here. We're going to say a quantity of 1, and we're going to save that. So now we can see we've added to that hierarchy, right? So we now have another component on this version of the BOM. Now real quick, let's take a look. What production sees, revision A, right, 3 components, 2, 3, and 4, all released. And then the working version, right, we have part 5 added. It's currently in WIP state. So if we think about what I need to do to release this to manufacturing, I don't need to change these components, but I do need to release the new component I've added, and I need to release a change for the BOM. So the BOM will go to revision B, the component will go to A, and these guys will all stay the same. So let's put that into effect. In order to do that, we have to have a change-driven process in our business, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to drive that process with Fusion Lifecycle by creating a change request and a change order. Now we do a lot of implementations every year, and customers have typically have a custom request and order process. Some even have that bundled into one engineering change process. So what you're seeing here, again, is standard to the product. This is what you're going to get out of the cloud if you were to purchase the product today. So we're going to look at the engineering change request process. So normally, anyone in the organization, from the CEO to the manufacturing person on the floor that's putting the product together, assembling, or the engineers in the engineering department, everyone can create a change request, anyone who touches that product in the organization, right? A change order is typically executed on by engineering or the operations team in order to put that change into effect. So they're doing a different evaluation. So if we take a look, we're going to create a new request in order to add that new material to the BOM. Right? So we're going to say add a component to the bill of material. Right? Simple explanation. And we're going to say that this is a high priority. And in the change reason code, we're going to say that it's a functional fix. Right? Need to add component for BOM. Now, one of the big things that's important in the change process, whether it be the request or the order, is approvals. So we do approvals a lot of different ways for companies. Again, what we're seeing here is what comes out of the tenant. What we're going to do here is we're going to pick the team that's going to approve this request. So we happen to have what we call an approval list, and this list will define who needs to approve this in stage 1 and stage 2. Now another thing I can do is I have a preset list of approvers, but I may just want to add someone along the way. So we have the capability to do that too. Now for today's demonstration, we're just going to use the preset list, which has me as the approver. So I'm going to go ahead and hit one more option, come down here to the bottom. when this request is approved, I want to go ahead and create an order. All right, so we're going to go ahead and pick that option. We're going to hit save here. And you can see that by picking this team, and there's a link here, I'll open that up on a new tab and show you where that team is defined. As you can see, here's the change request mechanical fast track team I'm required for the approval. Right. If we look back at our request, you can see it automatically puts my name in the predefined approvers, and remaining approvers is me, because we haven't walked this through approval yet. Okay. Now on this change request, we have some options. I can come over here in the option analysis. All right, so if we knew, for example, this change request was going to impact tooling cost or per unit cost, maybe we were going to disposition it, right? We were going to scrap or rework that component, what the risk is, I can add that information. Right. We can also say on the request what data is affected. Right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add those two components, because I need to tell the people who are going to evaluate this change that we're going to request a change to this assembly and this component. If I had red lines, markups, work instructions, other things, I could easily add those to my attachments tab here. And adding an attachment is as easy as just, let's call this guy a work instruction. And adding an attachment as easy as dragging and dropping. Right. Here we go. Now we need to push this through so that we can get to a change order. So we're going to take a look at the approval workflow. And I'm just going to expand my screen here so you guys can take a peek at this. So here we have the approval workflow that comes with the change request workspace. So for this single record, for my one request, it has to follow through this process. You'll see the green arrows and the gray arrows here, the lines between. This is what we call a transition. And then each box represents a workflow state where there's actions that need to take place for the business process. So here, what I'm going to do is we're going to submit the fast track. So you must have permissions in the workflow in order to do certain things. So me as the requester and the approver, I'm going to be able to do everything here. Normally what would happen is anyone could submit for a request, and then only engineering in the evaluation phase could push it for the control change board, and then change board over to complete. Right? So again, in the interest of time, today I'm going to push it through to complete. So we are going to submit this for fast track. You can see that I could enter in comments here if I like. So we're going to hit submit. We are now in the fast track state. Right? So we can see the status tracked. So another thing we covered in the overview is being able to report on important metrics in the system. So say the engineering manager could run a report right now in real time, and they could see all the engineering change requests and what state they were currently in. Right? This one would show up in fast track. I want to point something out real fast. Before I do this last submission, we're going to go over to the details tab, and you're going to see this related change order is blank. Okay? Remember, I checked this box. I said when this request is approved, create a change order. Right? So another way to approve in the workflow is this pull down. This pull down is similar to what you'll get in the mobile app. So remember, Fusion Lifecycle is available from any mobile device. So if you have people on the road that need to come in and approve a document, approve a change request or a CO, they can do that from the mobile app. So here I'm going to go ahead. We're going to pick fast track approval. We're going to go ahead and approve that. And when that record's approved, the system goes out and it now creates a change order. And I'll always know when an order was changed, created from a change request, because it provides a link, right? So we can kind of play hopscotch through the system, right, and get to all the relevant data that's tied together around our material. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to click this link, and we're going to take a look at the change order. Okay, so this is where we're now going to take our BOM. So the request has been approved. Now we're going to have a change order to actually release our bill of material, right? We're going to add that component, we're going to release it, and we're going to release the new bill with that component. So here you're looking at the change order. You can see some information comes over. So this information comes over from the request. We do need to reprioritize the order, and I want to again set the reason code, and change orders have their own set of teams. So we're actually going to pick the change order fast track team, and this approval module works the same way it did on the request. So you'll see when I hit save here, it's automatically going to pull me in as the predefined approver. And again, that list is managed in the same place. So we have some lists for a change request, some lists for a change order. The next thing I need to do on my change order is we need to add the affected items, right? I need to add the items that are going to be affected by this change. So I'm going to click Add, and we are going to go out and we're going to add that assembly and that new component. Again, I don't need to add the other children because they're already released and they're not changing. So we're going to click Next, and we're going to save. Now once I've added those components, there's a secondary step I need to do here. I need to tell this what I'm going to do with these components. Now I have different options. This component, part 5, has never been released before. So I want to bypass design and release this. Bypass design. Design is basically the prototype step phase. So for companies who have a prototype phase, we want to release it, but we want to call it version 1, 2, 3. Right? We want to track that internal change, but not quite release it outside the manufacturing or our partners. Right? That would be a design revision. We want to release this to market. We're going to bypass the design and release. Okay? And again, here is where I can set the effectivity. So I could set that for today, or you can see I could set that to a future date if I needed to. We're just going to choose today. Now notice my options here are different for the assembly. Right? The assembly is already released at revision A, so I need to do a production revision. Right? And again, we're going to make that effective today. I want to point something out. When I hit save here, it's going to give me a preview of what's going to happen to these components as they go forward. The assembly is going to go from A to B. Our part 5, which has never been released, will go from never released to revision A. This all happens as a result of the approval workflow. So let me show you real quick. If I go out and we take a peek at this assembly right now in the system, you'll see we still only have a working version and production A. That's because the change order hasn't been completed. Now, notice there is a stamp next to this number now. That tells me that this part exists on a change order right now. And if I look down here and I go to the related changes, I can see that my change order shows up, or will show up down here. Not there just yet. Right. So let's go back to our change, and let's take a look at the approval workflow for this change. Similar workflow, different steps. A change order doesn't go through engineering evaluation that happened back at the request. So we would go through a CCB review. We would decide to make a change. We would have the implementation of those changes, and then we would approve it and release it for manufacturing. Notice these gears on this workflow state. That's what we call a managed state. When this workflow reaches that state, it will put the change into effect, and that's when our affected items will go from A to B and nothing to A. So let's go ahead and push this through the workflow. Let's take a look at a few things here now, what's impacted. Now that we have approved this change order, if I go back to my Details tab, you'll see that here I have traceability of who approved the change order. So you can see my name is in the approved by. There's no remaining approvers because we're at the end of the process. If I look at the affected items now, you'll see effectivity has been set, and we now have a link to revision B and revision A. And notice these are no longer working versions, but B and A. Let's go back and take a look at that assembly. I'm going to close some tabs here. you now see that this bill of material has 4 components. It's in a production release at revision B. A has been superseded, so we still retain our revision history, right? So if I go back and I look at A, here we can see we have the 4-component BOM. I go to B, we have the 5-component BOM. Right? And all of our components are released. Now another nice thing is once we have, and you can do this on work in progress too, but it's a little more impressive to look at when we have different revisions of the BOM. We have a great compare tool in Fusion Lifecycle. So if I hit the red pencil here, I can go in and I can say, well, I want to compare revision B against revision A of this bill of material. And it'll go through, and you can see here it's telling me, well, the revision changed from A to B, and we added this component to the BOM. Right? And this works across the highest level to the lowest level of this bill of material. It'll track any changes. So if I were to remove a component, we'll actually get a minus sign, and it'll be stricken out to let me know that a component was removed. Right? If you have a different BOM view where there's different components and things changed in that BOM view, they'll also be stricken out. Another thing that's nice is now I want to take this compare and I want to share it with someone in a meeting, or I want to share it with someone that's not in the system, right? I could export the actual comparison of this, and it will open that comparison up in Excel. So we can not only export just the BOM structure, but we can actually export the BOM comparison. And it's just taking a minute to open that up. There we go. So here we can see the actual BOM compare information stored right here in Excel also. So that is a demonstration of the out-of-the-cloud standard items and BOMs and change management application. So if we think about what we did here, we were able to create a single material with a bill of material, release them via the change order process, and capture the important approvals and information along the way. With the time we have, this is a pretty straightforward demonstration. I do want to say that in implementation, when we do this for a customer, a lot of the fields, the workflow, even the approvals are all configurable for the customer's needs. So particularly like classification, depending on what you are manufacturing, what you're developing your business process around, what products, all of this is configurable. All right, so that brings us to the end of the demonstration for today. Ben, do you know if we have any questions in the queue?
Yeah, there are some. I answered a couple of them already. I figured we'd wait till the end and answer the rest. If you want to start taking a look at those while I wrap up the rest of the PowerPoint, then we can kind of answer those together.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm going to take over presenter control again myself. All right. So just a note that there are a lot of customers today across multiple industries that are already taking advantage of Fusion Lifecycle, and they're helping them improve their company processes now. So, this has been out for multiple years now. One of the questions I actually got was, what's the difference between Fusion 360 and this Fusion Lifecycle? Well, the answer there is that Autodesk decided to change the name from Fusion 360, which was originally what they launched their cloud-based PLM platform as. They've renamed it to Fusion Lifecycle in this last year. It's a little bit more descriptive in that it's all about managing your product's lifecycle and the processes in your company. All right. So now that you've seen a little bit, maybe you saw the introductory session a couple weeks ago, and you've seen a little bit about items and bill of materials, change management. If you're interested in understanding how PLM might actually impact your company, Tata Technologies does offer a PLM analytics portfolio. And the key here is that it helps you identify where you're at today with your own company processes in the context of PLM and where you might think you want to get to. So it's kind of like a self-assessment that we guide you through. And the first phase of that is called a PLM a PLM benchmark. Now there are multiple steps in our overall PLM analytics portfolio. The first step is typically the benchmark. That's that high-level assessment, lets you do kind of like a self-gap analysis of where you are today versus where you think you want to be, and it also compares you against maybe some of your peers in your own industry as well, based on some of our historical data that we've been gathering over the last several years. PLM impact, that's all about understanding the financial impact of doing something better by putting a PLM system into place and the ROI you could potentially get from that. PLM health check, that's more like a survey to all the users or the stakeholders in your company to get their take on where they think you are today with a product lifecycle perspective. And finally, a PLM roadmap, that's where we would work with you a little bit more in depth, some interviews and some analysis to help you define the future direction of PLM within your organization. So with that said, that kind of wraps up the presentation. So I would definitely invite anybody on the line here if you think you want us to get involved in potentially this PLM analytics portfolio. We offer PLM benchmarks as a free service. It's typically only an hour to an hour and a half engagement just to get the high level view of where you think you are, where you want to be, to determine does it make sense to investigate further. So I suppose now we can take a look at our Q&A area here. So I kind of answered one of these in the window to somebody that was all about what happened to Fusion 360. Well, it's now Fusion Lifecycle. Somebody asked about another PLM system like Team Center or maybe Innovia even. So PLM 360, which is now Fusion Lifecycle, it is similar in nature to that type of system. One of the key differences, I think, is that Fusion Lifecycle is a little bit more focused on the process itself and not necessarily so CAD-centric, which might lead us to another one of the questions down below. I think there's a couple questions relating to different CAD software, one of them being Fusion 360, which is Autodesk's cloud-enabled next-generation CAD platform, if you will. It's part of that Fusion platform as well. Rodney, you might want to take a stab at that. Do you have any inside information on kind of the relationship between Fusion 360 and Fusion Lifecycle and how the CAD and PLM data interacts?
Yeah, I was trying to ping out a couple of the questions that were there. So Fusion 360 product is really where, so there's a couple things going on. If you're familiar with the Fusion 360 product, that's really what has been in the past the document management portion of Fusion Lifecycle. There's some new capabilities, and with integration we can leverage, we can connect the two. So there was a lot of questions about, do I have to manually create the BOM in both of these systems if I'm managing those? And the answer is no, right? What we normally do is we have we'll probably have a future webinar around integration, but we typically integrate not just other Fusion platform products, but other business systems like ERP and CRM to ensure that all the bill of materials components are created once with the pertinent data to that business system. So for example, when we do an ERP integration, there's a lot of procurement and financial information related to that material that isn't necessarily relevant to PLM, right? So what we'll do is we'll create the item in PLM, and then like you saw today, when we release that material in PLM, it sends that material over to the other business system or other systems. Now I know another question I think I saw here that we get a lot is what about Inventor, right? What about my CAD? So what Fusion Lifecycle is not built to do is solve some of the problems that say Vault does or Fusion 360 does with its built-in product data management, right? PDM capabilities. So the CAD-related check-in, check-out, relationship management between the CAD files. Here we're dealing more with the business process tied to change management. So what we do is we integrate. So for example, we have a really thorough Vault integration. And what happens in that Vault integration is when you release a BOM in Vault, right? So you've created all the inventor components, you've assigned life cycles to it, and you release it in Vault. It goes to PLM, it goes to Fusion Lifecycle, and automatically generates that BOM so that it can then be tied to the rest of the organization for change management, change process, and other field data that needs to be captured. So we really solve a lot of these problems using integration, and I think that's a fantastic topic for us to cover in a future webinar. So I'll work with Ben, and we'll maybe that would be good for July, August timeframe. Once we've covered a few of the other things here, we'll cover integration. I can show that to a number of other business systems.
Perfect. And I guess I misread that other question that mentioned Fusion 360. I was assuming they were talking about like the Inventor Fusion, the CAD platform there, and if that also directly integrates with Fusion Lifecycle now.
Yeah, there is, so let me correct, because there's a lot of Fusion, a lot of 360 products. There's Autodesk 360, which is the cloud-based team collaboration document management, right? So think of similar to an engineering Dropbox type of application, but with a social feel to it. And then there's Fusion 360, which is the cloud simulation design platform, right? And then Fusion Lifecycle for lifecycle management, Fusion Configure, which is formerly Configure 1, which is for configure price quote tools. And then another one that you'll see in there is Fusion Connect, which is formerly C Control, which is the IoT platform in Fusion.
Yep, I think I got confused in my own mind again, and what transitioned to what and all that. So thanks for clarifying that, Rodney.
Yeah, it's changing all the time, so we're just trying to keep up with our customers.
All right, and I guess that kind of leads into the initial new Fusion platform, the product innovation platform, is that Fusion essentially is the core hub of the new cloud-enabled CAD technology, the cloud-enabled PLM technology, the Internet of Things with Fusion Connect. There's several other cloud Fusion type, I guess you could say, areas anyway that Autodesk has been working on, and they're all interrelated and interconnected in some way. So, all right. So I think that wraps up all the questions that I've seen. So I think we're going to shut down the recording for now. I will stick around for a few more minutes, but I'd like to thank everybody for joining today. And keep in mind, we've got a next webinar on May 18th, so keep an eye out for the invitation to that. If anybody has any questions or would like to schedule maybe a discussion around a PLM benchmark or something like that, feel free to contact us either at plmanalytics@tatatechnologies.com or myself, ben.curtin at tatatechnologies.com. So thanks for attending.